in the middle of an election year, and cannabis is definitely a poison chalice in regards to policy, because there is such a strong opinion one way and the other. So,
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Harmonia Podcast. We are joined here today by this lovely, lovely Rebecca here, who is a hemp cultivator and expert. Hi, Rebecca, how are you?
hi, Bertie. Great. Thanks for inviting me onto your podcast today.
No, thank you so much for coming on. I think, we talk a lot about the plant and we talk a lot about medical cannabis and stuff like that, but, there are so many components when it comes to the actual plant, and hemp is a huge, huge part of it. So I think it would be really interesting for people to actually gain a little bit of an understanding around that area. But before we even go into it, Rebecca, let me hand over to you so you can do a lovely introduction.
Hi. So I'm managing director of the British Hemp Alliance. We're the only organisation in the UK that's looking at hemp as an agricultural crop to help the government reach net zero. So we focus on the environmental benefits of hemp for the farmer and for moving into a more circular economy. So that's where we are pushing the government to have hemp recognised as a agricultural crop and take it out of the shackles of it being seen as a controlled substance. I've been working with hemp in this way since 2006, when I read a really brilliant master's thesis looking at hemp and its environmental benefits. So even that many years ago, there was an awareness of it being a powerful crop for carbon sequestration, phytoremediation, follow-on yields of follow-on crops, and repairing toxic soils, compacted soils. There's a lot of information now that's coming out of the environmental benefits, agricultural benefits of hemp as a plant. So I saw a really important and missed part of this amazing plant. So I've been delving deep in for the last how many years is that? Quite a few years. And we set up the British Hemp Alliance to really lobby the government and to support farmers in growing the hemp, and also to be able to access things like biodiversity net gains and also carbon credits, which are now coming online quite strongly for the farming community, and where hemp can really play an important part in increasing an additional income for the hemp farmer.
Wow. That is all such amazing work. And I love the fact that you guys are ensuring that you're taking care of the environment in the process. I think, a lot of businesses say they're green, but aren't necessarily green in our country. You know what? I'm not going to go into the whole ozone layer thing. That's a completely new topic. But no, that sounds like amazing. It sounds like a lot of amazing work that you are doing. For some people, like myself, actually, can you tell us more about the actual hemp plant itself? Because I would be really honest to tell you that other than the very little that I know, I don't really know that much about it.
Well, hemp is cannabis sativa L. It just has a limited amount of THC in it. So the legal amounts of THC is 0.2% in the field. So you can't any hemp that grows beyond that is then considered, I suppose, like THC cannabis. We call it hemp to clarify the difference between an industrial plant, that is what hemp is, and the medicinal side of the cannabis plant. So that's why we use the word hemp, because we find that if we don't differentiate the two plants, that people get very, very confused as to what is cannabis. Um, so we in England, we are still really one of the last countries in the world that isn't recognizing hemp as an agricultural crop. So pretty much in most of Europe, in South America now, in South America, Latin America, and certainly, of course, in America, hemp is they're rolling back the regulations around hemp, but here in the UK, we're still pretty much stuck in this old narrative of hemp being a very dangerous drug, yada yada yada. and failing to recognize it as the important agricultural crop that it is, and how it can benefit farmers as we see massive climate change happening right now.
That's very interesting. So, in terms of the work that is going on in the UK, is there any sort of like positive outlook around finally no? The look on your face said,
Have you seen our governments? Unfortunately, we're in the middle of an election year, and cannabis is definitely a poison chalice in regards to policy, because there is such a strong opinion one way and the other. So we're an incredibly conservative country, and the ignorance on this plant is really unbelievable. Actually, that people are still believing it's a dangerous drug after just um, so much information and research is out there that clearly shows that it's a medicine and super important for humanity on so many levels. So we are closer than we have been. You would think that the British government, it would be looking for alternative income coming in, economic income coming in, and so uh, they can't see the financial benefits of it. They're not aware of the financial benefits of it. I think there's a fear of changing the status quo and then having a problem on their hands, even though we can clearly see from Portugal, from Netherlands, and from various other America, where they've rolled back regulation and you don't have a load of zombies walking around high. In fact, I really believe that a lot of people who are smoking, even in the UK, are doing it for medicinal reasons, medical reasons. They're just not in the medical system. It's just much easier to, do it on the black market because it is illegal. However, with hemp, it's a nonsensical situation because if growing hemp and then turning it into industrial products like bioplastics or batteries or concrete or hempcrete, which is where it's really kind of being focused on right now. And that's because of the volumes that is needed. And concrete is just one of the most polluting industries at the moment. And they're having to show that they're using less polluting materials for cement. Hempcrete is a fantastic binder and a fantastic alternative. And actually, Kingspan is one of the biggest construction companies, probably globally, just bought hemp flax UB from Germany. So you can see there is a move by the industry to recognize hemp as a potential industrial product. But if you're not ingesting that product, if that product is purely there for industrial reasons, why do we have a license? Why is it controlled substance? Why is there limited THC? Because we're not going to be ingesting it. It's got nothing to do with human health and well-being. This is about planetary health and well-being. And there doesn't seem to be an awareness or a separation of hemp as an industrial, environmental, agricultural crop and hemp as a medicine. And so this is where we're trying to clear up that misinformation in that intersection of that space.
do you know what? That is very accurate because up until now, I did not realize the benefits of hemp to this extension either. So I think that the majority of the time when people think about hemp, they immediately think about medical cannabis, and that is their like the very first thought that goes on into their heads. And I'm ashamed to say, yeah, I'm one of them. Like I would have initially thought, oh, it's the one that they sell there that's mine, 0.2. You can get some CBD that they call hemp, and it's minus 0.2. And I think there's a whole gray area around the law on whether or not it can be consumed or not. But yeah, because from my understanding, there is no law, so that's what makes the gray area around whether or not it can be consumed.
No, the big problem is that the farmer has to get a hemp license in order to grow the hemp. In order to get that hemp license, it has to apply to the Home Office. So it's a Homeland Security issue. It's not an agricultural issue, and it's also the hemp license is housed in the Firearms and Drugs Department of the Home Office. So even in the office that it lands in, there's no agricultural support for farmers. There's only one person working in that department, and so they don't have any farming understanding. And so we are very limited, or farmers are very limited in being able to apply for a license. Also, they've made it really complicated to get the license. It's not easy. You have a 3-month window from January to March. Then you have to be accepted. You have to give very clear directions, GPS directions of where you're going to grow the hemp in the farm. If you change that, then your license is invalid. So there's no room for change. Also, there's a seed shortage. So farmers are planning like years in advance. So they might be applying for a hemp license, but they might not get the go ahead until March, and the plant has to be in the ground by April or May. So it gives farmers a very small window to prepare for growing. Once you get the license, you have it for 3 years, but the initial starting point is incredibly off-putting for farmers, and that is one of the big problems. Plus, you have to pay for it. Pay for the hemp license about £600. So when you're looking at other crops that are subsidised, supported by DEFRA and helped by the government, and then you come across hemp where there's just so many obstacles to start with, it really puts farmers off. But the biggest problem and the biggest issue that we're having is that it's considered a controlled substance, which is why it's in the Home Office and why it's in the Drugs and Firearms Department of the Home Office. And by it being a controlled substance, or recognized as a controlled substance, it means that it has limitations on investment. So it becomes a much riskier investment. So there's limited investment flowing into the industry. There's a problem with POCA, which is Proceeds of Crime Act. So farmers, if their crop goes above 0.2% THC, then they're in breach of the license, and therefore they're in breach of POCA. That's a big problem, a very, very big problem. And because of that, there isn't the investment that's really needing to be flowed into this industry to change some of the, to allow this industry to really grow and expand, and to look at industrial hemp as a really important crop for reaching net zero, and also for producing a lot of carbon negative materials that are so desperately needed. So it's a real short-sightedness, I would say, from the UK government for, on the one hand, having, brought in the Climate Change Act and have committed to net zero by 2030. And on the other side of it, not rolling back legislation and regulation that is stopping an industry from really thriving that can help the government reach that net zero targets.
And what do you think these barriers are as a result of? I mean, whenever the government does stuff like this, it's usually for financial gain, but like, is yeah, financial gain is all about the money.
Because we can show that if they rolled back the regulation, then there's a jobs to be had. There's a whole industry that you could potentially be growing there. That you could get billions flowing into the industry. My feeling is that they're concerned that if they open it up to that low hanging fruit, then basically it's just a very small next step to getting it, I guess, legalized or recreationally legalized. And I think that that's what they're terrified of. And so that's why they're just dragging their heels. I mean, DEFRA has just sponsored a 5-year project on carbon cropping. So looking at willow, miscanthus, and hemp as potential carbon cropping plants. So DEFRA have recognised hemp as an important agricultural crop, but the Home Office are not willing at the moment to work with DEFRA to hand the license back over to DEFRA. So even though you've got DEFRA, which is the Department for the Environment and Rural Affairs, recognizing the potential for hemp and also as a carbon cropping plant, there's not joined up thinking here. And so you've still got all the barriers while it remains within the Home Office and as a controlled substance. And all of that needs to be let go of, or done away with, so that we can really move forward. So what the British Hemp Alliance is pushing for is, well, number one, to have it released as if it's an industrial crop and it's not getting consumed, and it doesn't matter what the THC levels are, because it's being turned into industrial products. So um, realistically, we believe there should be no license to it. Also, with climate change, the THC levels are very, very volatile, because the THC is dependent on the UV sunlight that hits the plant. So if you test a plant early on in the season, it's going to have lower THC than if you test it right at the end of the season. The THC will be higher. So with climate change and a warming of the planet, it's going to be very difficult to keep the hemp to a 0.2% variable. So we're asking for 1% variable, because even with a 1% variable, you're not going to get high if you smoke the leaf or the flower anyway. So it's all a bit of a moot point. And finally, giving the farmers the opportunity to harvest the leaf and the flower, which are still prohibited under the license. So you can't harvest the leaf, the flower, or the root of the hemp plant. You can only harvest the seed or the stalk. So the most valuable part of the plant is really not being able to be utilized, and the farmers are having to burn it in the field. The ridiculousness of that is that you can import a load of CBD flowers and make CBD in the UK, but the farmers here can't grow it or harvest it here. So we're losing out, farmers are losing out on a potential product and income from the leaf and the flower that would benefit. And British grown CBD, for example, which is legal, we're not able to access that market, or farmers aren't able to access that market. So the license is really crippling on all levels the industry.
And can I say, this is probably a very silly question, but if the THC is higher than zero point 0.2, does that mean all of that hemp will have to get destroyed?
Yeah. So if they come in and they test,
Seriously? So if you got it zero point 0.3, so if it was zero point 0.3, you'd have to destroy all of that.
yeah, no,
Well, then I can see why investors wouldn't necessarily want to get involved because if you can't really control the THC that's going to grow in it, like, you can to some extent, but it's quite difficult. So, yeah, that's pretty tricky. Hopefully, you guys do get it to 1%, which is a little bit more realistic. Like, what is the goal looking around that?
and I mean, in Italy, it's 0.6%. In America, it's 0.3%. In Canada, I think it's 0.3%. In Thailand, it's 1%. In a lot of the Asian and Latin American companies, it's 1%. Countries, it's 1%. So it varies throughout Europe. I think Europe moved it to 0.3% as well, in line with America. But I think in England, it's still 0.2%. Um, because we're out of Brexit now. It's going to be interesting. And also, we're in an election year, so no government at the moment is going to touch it. However, with if we get a Labour government in, we might be able to use this environmental argument, because they're bit more greener than, like, the the Conservative government are. However, Keir Starmer's very clearly, who is the shadow PM, has very clearly claimed that he is still into the war on drugs, and he wouldn't be recreationalizing cannabis anytime soon in the UK. So I can't see that. I can't see that changing. However, if you put pressure on the government to reach net zero targets, missing out on this hemp crop is just a real ignorance on behalf of the government. And the biggest problem is POCA, Proceeds of Crime Act, because it's so murky that, yeah, that investors don't want to take the risk. Saying that, there's been 3 or 4 processes being built at the moment in the UK, um, by a number of companies that have been able to raise investment money for these processing plants. Kingspan has bought hemp flax, which is a really big step forward for, basically hemp and just being recognized by a big company like that, who obviously very concerned about the proceeds of crime and that kind of stuff. So there is a movement forward. It's just, as always, incredibly slow when it comes to government. However, we've said that there doesn't need to be a legislation change. You can just put in a clause that kind of omits industrial hemp the from the article that is calling it a controlled substance, and that would be much quicker. That would be a much quicker process.
No, that sounds like a much quicker process as well. I just find it really funny how, obviously the government is going on about green this, green that. And then here you are offering this amazing product that can actually make a world of difference, especially considering, again, global warming is a real thing, okay? And you would think that they would put more efforts into trying to preserve the environment rather than, I'm gonna say it, profit, yeah. And what's gonna be easier for them. But anyways, hey ho, this is unfortunately the society that we live in today. I suppose sort of like just to sort of round things off then, what sort of feedback would you then give to the industry, and even if it expands as far as the cannabis industry, because at the end of the day, it's all one big family. What kind of support do you think would be advantageous for you guys?
For us, it's a recognition. So we're building at the moment a big hemp hub, knowledge hub. So I think there's been a big disparity between the cannabis industry and the hemp industry, and there's been a big separation. That is because hemp's been legal to grow in the UK under this license since 1993, but recreational cannabis has been illegal, for years. Also, even though we do have medicinal cannabis here, as you know, it's a bit of a shitstorm with regards to who can get access to it and who can actually get it off medical from a medical source. It's also much more expensive than if you got it on the black market. So what we're seeing is that there and actually, hemp has really always been the Cinderella of the cannabis industry because it doesn't make a lot of money. It can do, but I equate it to the tortoise and the hare. The hare is medical cannabis or CBD, and a lot of people saw a lot of money in it and hopped around and bantered out a lot of statistics that made it look like it was going to be very lucrative. And unfortunately came up across a lot of regulation and kickback and all sorts of political issues, whereas hemp has always been there in the background as an environmental plant and agricultural crop. For me, it's the low hanging fruit. So there is when you're talking about cannabis, talking about it as an environmental crop really helps maybe to sell it to somebody who has only still got their old rhetoric in their mind that it's a drug and that everyone goes insane on it and it creates mental health issues and the yada yada yada. We all know the boring narrative around creating a new story around it of that it's a really important crop for net zero, that it does produce 25,000 products from food, from the seed, from the fiber, even from the root. Did you know that gunpowder was made from the root of the hemp plant originally? So it was originally one of the materials that helped make gunpowder, and in fact, you can't use the root. It's an illegal. It's part of the illegal parts of the plant. The root, the stem, and the leaf are the illegal parts of the plant. But the root taps 3 meter, about a meter deep. It's really got a long tap root, which means that it sucks up nutrients from deep in the soil and brings them up to the surface of the soil. It also has filaments that go and connect to all the other hemp plants, so it churns up the soil, breaking up compacted soil and creating more worm growth. On the outside of the plant, you get about 11 tons of carbon sequestered in a hectare of hemp. But then you also have all this, it goes down into the soil and gets captured in the soil. So you bring the carbon back into the soil. And they're saying that's about another 10 10 tons. So you're looking at 21 tons of carbon being sequestered out of the atmosphere and putting placed into the soil in a hectare of hemp. So it has an amazing benefits. It was also used to clean up Chernobyl. So yeah, when Chernobyl spillage happened in Russia, they used the hemp to clear up the nuclear waste from the soils. It also brings loads of biodiversity, like in the 4 months that you have a hemp crop, it brings in lots of pollinators and really important insects. And so, and really increases biodiversity, which is why it's being seen as a biodiversity net gain now. So it really is a really powerful plant. It also phytoremediates soil. And then you can just, after 4 months, take it out of the ground, turn it into a carbon negative product, put in your winter wheat, and your winter wheat yields increase 20 to 30% because of all the nutrients that have been sucked from the lower part of the soil to the top of the soil. It means that the soil is now nutrient rich for follow-on crops. So it's great as a break crop for an arable farmer that's going through the cycle. And we found that that has a lot more potential for farmers to look at cannabis rather than this very separation between like GMP medicinal cannabis and what that entails, which is all really a lot of investment, a lot of high security, indoor lighting, a lot of heavy energy needed compared to a normal arable farmer that is a smallholder that wants to grow an arable crop as a break crop on their rotation cycle, make some money, and increase yields. And hemp is an obvious crop for that. Also, we're getting a real issue with rapeseed. With rape, we have a big rape industry in this country, but it's been absolutely blighted by a beetle. So rape production is down massively. And so hemp is a fantastic alternative to rape and also gives the soil a chance to recover because also rape does suck up a lot of nutrients, whereas hemp puts back the nutrients. So it's a much better nutrient rich plant or crop to grow as an arable crop, especially if your soil is massively depleted. All it needs is nitrogen. But if you put a cover crop of clover, for example, and then you grow hemp, you've got that rich nitrogen from the clover.
First of all, wow, thank you so much. I am learning so much here today, and I'm super excited now. I'm no, because I'm just sitting here going, why? What am I missing? Why is this not happening right now? Why are more farmers not using this? I mean, by the sounds of it, this can literally solve a lot of the problems that we have with the environment around us. Um, anyways, okay, so let's. Otherwise, I'm just gonna. It doesn't make, yeah, like I don't know.
I know it's nonsensical. No, but especially as we're in a climate crisis. I mean, we are in an ecological crisis right now, and I feel a lot of that has to be done with the way that we don't grow crops that we're cutting down like ancient forests and for soya production and palm oil production. Where if we had just gone into hemp production, you're getting all the benefits. It's just nonsensical. It's also completely nonsensical as to how any global government or global system could ban a plant, prohibit a plant that Mother Earth has provided for us and is our best friend in the plant world. Cannabis is our best friend in the plant world. It feeds us nutrients. It feeds us endocannabinoids that are so essential for our endocannabinoid system. It brings the plants back into. It brings the planet back into balance. It brings us back into balance. It is a balancer, and we can see that since the prohibition of cannabis, everything's gone out of balance.
No, no, I fully agree with you. The way I look at it, like I use like, cannabis or CBD, whatever, for my skin, hair, obviously for my physical health. Learning it's amazing for the environment. There are so many different properties when it comes to it, and I think this is what it is. Again, I do not believe in any government, so I'm just gonna go out and say it. Like, it's about money. Because if you think about it, right? this one plant can replace so many different things. That means a lot of people are going to be losing out on money. So they would rather just stay rich and continue destroying the environment, continue having people struggling to get mental health support because the conventional methods aren't working for them. Same with physical health, like just because of financial gain. And yeah, I'm going to leave it at that before I get myself into trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a really funny slide that actually sums it all up. Um, let me just read it out to you because it is really quite funny. Let me bear with me for 1 minute. It's kind of, if we tolerated your pot use, next we'd be legalizing hemp, which would threaten my investments in synthetics, fabrics, plastics, pesticides, oil, prisons, etc. So I have no choice but to jail you for 30 years. So it's a judge talking to a defendant.
Thank you. Yep. Yep. It just summarized everything that I'm ranting about over here. Yep. Thank you. And we will end it at that. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Rebecca. This has been amazing. I feel like I've learned so much, and I really hope that the audience learns a lot about hemp as well and gains a little bit more insight. And hopefully, this will help you as well to get that recognition that is well deserved. Yeah, no, yeah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Berta. Thank you for inviting me.
So for anybody who is interested, all of Rebecca's links will be in the description of this video. And we look forward to seeing everybody next week where we're going to be exploring medical cannabis across the pond.